Welcome to Women's Banquet, or Women's Day and Banquet. Sorry, we're not quite to the banquet part. I'm just going to do a brief introduction of our speaker and the workshop title, and I'm just going to let Bethany tell you more about herself. But our 3 o'clock workshop is going to be given by Bethany Jett, who is also our banquet speaker. And she is going to do, her workshop title is The You God Loves. And she sent me this description. In this workshop, Bethany shares how knowing your love language and personality type can help you become comfortable with who God created you to be. And I think all of us will be able to relate to what she has to say. So I'm going to turn it over to Bethany, and welcome.
Thank you. How are you guys doing today? Good. How many of you have ever taken a personality test before? How many of you have ever done the 5 love languages test or quiz? Okay, some of you. We're going to definitely get into the love languages tonight at the banquet and really cover the personalities in here. I am an introvert, which is, most people don't believe me when I say I'm an introvert because I'm a public speaker. Any introverts in the room? My sisters. How many extroverts are in the room? You feel better when you're with people and you like to get out and you like to hang out. How many of you are kind of both in the middle? Good. So as an introvert, every time a speaker would get on stage and make us do some kind of activity, I died inside. And now that I'm a speaker, I get to do it to everyone else. So it's like my revenge. So we're just going to raise hands. I'm going to ask you some questions. Raise your hand if you've ever felt insecure. Raise your hand if you've ever felt completely awkward in a social situation. I'll just do double hands on all these. Raise your hand if you've ever forgotten someone's name when you're talking to them. Here's what I do. If I can't remember someone's name, I'll say, "Oh, have you met so-and-so?" And I step back so then they have to introduce themselves. It's terrible. Raise your hand if you've ever driven into a ditch or a sinkhole that you knew was there. Mom? Okay. Raise your hand if you've ever walked into the wrong bathroom on accident. That takes a minute to figure out. And then what do? I need solidarity on this one. Raise your hand if you've ever applied fake eyelashes. Oh, no. Okay, so keep your hands raised. Raise your hand if you've ever applied fake eyelashes and then trimmed them on your eye. That would be me. The reason they have those directions on the package is because someone's going to do something stupid. Raise your hand if you've ever walked anywhere out of a bathroom, through a store with something stuck to the bottom of your shoe. Raise your hand if you've ever missed a deadline. Yeah. One time I was walking through a hotel. My husband had the kids, and I felt so posh. I was going to write for the weekend, and I'm walking into the hotel, feeling pretty sassy. And I walk all the way through the lobby, do what I got to do, get up to my room, and then I realize I have a Capri Sun stuck to the back of my leg. Thanks, kids. Last one. Raise your hand if you've ever felt like you weren't enough. God has made each one of us unique. We have talents, we have gifts. Psalm 139:14 says, "You are fearfully and wonderfully made." Isaiah 43:4 tells us that we are precious, loved, and honored. Jeremiah 29:11, which is so many people's life verses, it's a great verse to cling to, tells us that God thinks good thoughts to us and that he has hope for us, a plan for our future. And then John 3:16, the verse we all memorize when we are very little, tells us that he thinks that we're worth sacrificing for. So even though many of us have felt awkward and uncomfortable, done really stupid things like cutting our eyelashes, that don't grow back, by the way, I will tell you, very fast, God still thinks that we're amazing. And so pretty much that's what this workshop is so that you can understand a little bit more about who you are and then how, in turn, to love other people. So we're going to talk about being confident in 3 areas. The first one is social situations. So I've got a list of things to, just tips on how to navigate a social situation, particularly if you're introverted and really don't like talking to people or it makes you really nervous. One thing that I noticed that I did a lot, and then when I was in youth ministry with my husband for 10 years, our high school and middle school girls tended to do these same kinds of things. When someone would give them a compliment, they would say, "Oh, no, I'm not." Like someone said, "Oh, you look so pretty." They would say, "Oh, no, I'm not." Or if we said, "I love that dress," they would say, "Oh, I just got it at the thrift store." Or they would demean the compliment in a way. So one of the ways to be confident in a social situation is to just be confident in the compliment. Have you ever felt when someone gives you a compliment, it kind of makes you feel uneasy? Because you don't really know what to say back. Am I supposed to compliment them, or do I just say thank you? And typically, thank you is the easiest thing to do. Another way to be confident, or at least appear confident in a social situation, is to just look people in the eye, but not stare at them. So that can be awkward too if someone's got the eye contact, or they get really, really close to you. Have you ever had someone who just got in your space, and you're kind of doing this situation? And then you don't want to make eye contact with them anymore? Speaking kindly, speaking slowly, speaking loudly for them to hear you are all ways to at least project confidence. The handshake, though, is an interesting thing. When you go to any kind of social event and they have name tags, typically you would put the name tag on the right side of your shirt. And if you're right-handed, that feels awkward because you want to stick it just naturally, like where you would cross your heart. The reason that it goes on the right is so that when someone shakes your hand, their line of sight goes straight up to your name tag. Yeah, interesting. I'm glad we don't have name tags in here because I did that talk once and everyone started switching their name tags, and then I felt bad for saying that. Bill Gates. Microsoft founder Bill Gates made a huge faux pas when he met with the South Korean president. He went in for this nice handshake, but his hand is in his pocket. And in that culture, that is a serious sign of disrespect. What's interesting is feeling confident in social situations, making eye contact or speaking loudly, that kind of seems like common sense things, or why do we need to know about it? But the thing with Bill Gates is when he was there for a pretty big purpose, but it got overshadowed in the media because of the handshake mistake. And that's one thing, it didn't really need to happen. If they had just taken the time to let him know, what was going on in the culture, what he needed to do to be appropriate in the role, he wouldn't have done that. And so it's unfortunate sometimes that small things can actually take over a much bigger thing. You guys need to find a partner. Like I said, this is my revenge. So we're gonna talk about some handshakes. There's depending on what website you look at, there are several different nicknames for the different kind of handshakes that people do to us. The politician. So just reach across to somebody and then you grab their hand and you cup their hand on top. You've seen this on TV, okay? Sometimes you go in for the elbow. Have you ever saw someone grab your elbow? A little bit. The politician. The reason politicians use this type of handshake is because it shows warmth. They're they're touching you in a more intimate way than just the handshake. That's the politician. Can we go to the next one? The hand wrestler. Take somebody's hand, and then one of you will be the dominant one here. Then you turn their hand underneath. Okay? If you ever had someone take your hand and turn it upside down, they're telling you with their body language that they are dominating you, basically. They're the power person. How many of you turn the hand over? Honestly. You got the next one. Don't do this one. The bone crusher. Have you ever been someplace and someone just squeezes your hand so tight? Next one. Okay, another controlling handshake would be when someone, different than the politician, when someone shakes your hand and they pull you, even slightly. It's another body language move where they're saying that they're the ones in control again. So aren't we going to be paying attention so much on Sunday morning and during the meet and greet? Okay. The teacup. Now, when someone does this to me, I don't know what to do. So sometimes it's like this, right? Like, what is that? Usually they're afraid you're going to be the bone crusher, right? Like, I don't know. The teacup one is also if you shake someone's hand, instead of being flat against the other person's hand, they cup it. So do that. Take someone's hand, you might have to take turns, and then cup it. So the inside of your palm does not touch theirs. That feels very weird. What that tells you, if someone does that to you, either this thing or the teacup, what they're telling you is they don't want the intimacy of a handshake and they want to keep their distance. Some of this is all very subconscious. But if we're paying attention to how people are reacting with us, we can kind of get an idea. So if someone teacups you, you might not want to give them a hug. Might as well give them their space. The stiff arm. Everyone done that? So weird. I don't get it. That's also a move telling you that they are keeping their distance as well because you can't get any closer. The dead fish. This is our last one. So just basically go out to reach their handshake, but you're really pulling a fast one on them because you're not going to shake their hand. You're just going to let your hand go real limp. So try that. It feels terrible. Now, this could be someone who is reserved. They're not very confident in their handshake. That could be a sign of that. Or it could be a sign that they're not even interested in talking to you or being with you. Because they're just doing this. Okay, so be confident in social situations. The next thing we have to do is be confident in our calling. 1 Thessalonians 5:24 says, "The one who called you is faithful, and he will do it." And I love that. Because typically God calls us to things that make us very nervous, like introverts and public speaking. They don't go together very well. But that verse, 1 Thessalonians 5:24, says, "The one who calls you is faithful, and he will do it." And so if we always remember that if God has called us to do something, whether it be volunteering at our church or taking a job in a specific field, taking in foster kids, whatever your situation is where you feel this call that God has on your life, but it makes no sense, your friends and family don't understand it, but you know it's what you're supposed to do, we can trust that God will help take care of that. The Bible also says that we're the body of Christ and we each play different parts. I think in your little packets, there's notepads and paper. So if you don't have a notepad and paper and you want to get out your phone and use your phone notes app, go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and get out a piece of paper because you're going to write some stuff down. If you want to use your phone, feel free. If you're on your phone, I'm always pretending that you're live tweeting the session. This is great. Really, you're just texting the babysitter. It's fine. Sometimes it can be hard to think of the things that we're good at, but right now we're going to write down 3 things that we're good at. 3 things. If you're not sure and you've got a good friend next to you, just like nudge them and ask them. Because sometimes our friends see a lot of greatness in us that we can't see ourselves. So while you're thinking and writing, I'm going to read you a verse from 1 Corinthians 12, 4 through 8. There are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit. There are different kinds of service, but the same Lord. There are different kinds of working, but the same God works all of them in all men. Now to each one, the manifestation of the Spirit is given for the common good. And this isn't a talk on our spiritual gifts, but hospitality, for example. Maybe you're really good at making people feel comfortable. Maybe you're really great at having youth kids over to your house in the summer because they're bored and their parents are working and you want to, give them a place to be. If you're having trouble writing down the 3, just let it simmer. But I would like, before you guys go home tonight, to have at least 3 things that you're good at. Go ahead. So have you ever heard the term fake it till you make it? Okay. My co-author and I are writing a book called Platinum Faith, and we were talking in the car. We have a very short deadline to write this book. And she said, I don't even know how we're going to get the book done. Book still isn't done, by the way. We missed our deadline. So when I said, have you ever missed your deadline? It's like all of me right now with the publisher. And as we're talking in the car about how we're going to get this done and thinking there's no way, she said this. She said, I think we're just going to have to faith it till we make it, which became the first chapter of the book. So if I, in my physical body, cannot do or I don't think I can do some of the things that I think God has called me to do, or if you feel like, I know that God's called me to this, but I just don't know how it's going to get it done, we don't have to fake it. We can faith it. And I kind of like that little play on the words. I want to think about 2 women who were called to do extraordinary things in really kind of terrible circumstances, especially at the time. Mary, Jesus' mother, was called to have a baby out of wedlock. I can't imagine how she felt at that time. She knew it's what God told her to do, and that was going to happen to her. And yet, I just wish that I could be a fly on the wall back then. How did the other girls her age treat her? How was she perceived? Did anybody believe her? Did she even tell anybody? Or did she just walk through that alone? My mom, who was over here because I made fun of her with the ditch a little bit ago, when I were talking about this, and she was talking about Bathsheba, who we always think of in the very beginning when we meet her with King David, where he takes her and then he has her husband killed. But later in 1 Kings, it's very interesting. David is dying, and the prophet Nathan comes to Bathsheba because someone else has already set himself up as king as David is dying, not Solomon, who was supposed to be the king. So Nathan goes to Bathsheba, and he tells her, you need to go talk to David to make sure that Solomon is the one who sets up the temple, who is the heir. And what's interesting about that is we don't hear a lot about her anymore. And yet, I wonder when that was happening to her, when she had to leave her husband, when her husband died, did she lose her friends? What was life like for her? But yet, Solomon, who was the wisest man to ever live, her son, was on the throne partly due to her relationship with David throughout those next years, her relationship with Nathan, and then her relationship with Solomon. It's just interesting if we can think back to what those women actually went through. It couldn't have been easy. And I'm sure they had to faith it till they made it. Okay? All right, this is the fun part. The personality tests. Anybody on Facebook ever see those tests that come by like all the time? Like, what kind of lipstick color are you? Do you know what I'm talking about? I know I'm not the only one. How many of you actually take that? You don't have to raise your hands. I always just kind of want to know what it says. So be confident in relationships. No matter how old you are, I think it's important to really understand who God made you to be and who he made other people to be. Because if we can kind of dive in to the different types of personalities that we have, we can not only treat ourselves better, we can understand ourselves a little bit better, maybe cut ourselves some slack, But we can also treat our coworkers better, our children better, our spouses better, our family members better when you understand why they are the way they are. Has anyone ever wondered why does that person do the things that they do? Or why are they the way that they are? Understanding personality profiles can really help with this. One of my companies is called Serious Writer, and we have a very small team that works together to run conferences, events, and online classes. And as we were growing the company, my business partner, Kyle, really likes the DISC personality system. Is anyone familiar with the DISC, D-I-S-C? Good, because we're going to talk about it today. I like the Myers-Briggs, the ones like the INFJ, ENFP. Anyone familiar with the Myers-Briggs personality types? So when you work with us, or even if we have interns work with us, we always make sure we figure out what their DISC personality style is. Because when we know that, we know the type of tasks to give them, and then we know when to be frustrated and when to not be frustrated based on their personalities. One of our mottos is grace upon grace upon grace. And so if someone misses a deadline or someone doesn't get something done, instead of our first reaction being, we're late, I need this now, I'm mad at you, and all that, we tend to say things like, did something happen? Is there anything that I can do? And then what can we do to fix this for the next time? And what I found is I was treating my business partners that way, which is a lot of respect, it's a lot of grace. But then with my kids, when they don't do something, I don't say, is everything okay? What can I do for you? I'm like, why didn't you pick up your toys? Why are we late going out the door? Why did you throw taco meat all over the place like confetti and smear French onion dip on the wall? True story. Why do they do those things? I don't know. I just react with those. But if we can start thinking and figuring out each other's personality profiles, it makes it easier when working with them. So as we've been working in this professional field, I'm like, we've got to start shifting how we treat people who aren't as close to us as friends and family. We need to treat our family and friends really the best. And sometimes, and so often it's switched. So I'm excited to jump into this with you guys. Okay, the DISC basically is 4 personality quadrants. And so at the very top, you see dominance, which is the D. I stands for influence. S is steadiness. And C is conscientiousness, or conscientious. When I was in direct sales, one of the things that they taught us to do was to be able to sit down with a woman or see a woman in a room or interact with her and very quickly be able to figure out which one of those was her primary personality. And in doing so, we would mirror that personality back to them. And that sounds like, this like tricky, manipulative sales technique. And it kind of is, actually. But then I started thinking about it in terms of how we react to people biblically. And if I can figure out which one of those 4, dominant, influence, steadiness, or conscientiousness, is your primary, and I can mirror myself to you that way, then I can actually serve you better. Because if you're more quiet and more of the steadiness, then you don't want me coming at you, really loud and excited and super hyper and in your face, because that's not how you like to receive information. But for someone who is a high I, or the influential, they get really excited when you get really excited. And so I think of this as a way of serving other people if we can figure this out. Next slide. Some of you have maybe heard of this in terms of choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, and melancholy. Have you ever heard of that version of this? Okay. Do you love the My Little Pony? Or what? So there's 3 kind of main personality temperament styles that all kind of fall underneath the same one. So underneath the high D would be the choleric, the influential would be the sanguine, the steadiness, the phlegmatic, and the conscientious, the melancholy. All big words that I tend to forget all the time. One more example of the test, and then we'll help you figure out which one is your main one. Have you ever seen the lion, the otter, the beaver, and the golden retriever? This is Gary Smalley's Personality types, the same thing. The lion is the dominant. The otter would be the influential. The golden retriever would be steady. And then the beaver would be the conscientious. But I was thinking, if I'm like a high C, I don't want my spirit animal to be the beaver. Like, or the golden retriever, actually. The only one that looks cool up there is the lion. Like, that's not fair. I'm pretty sure like a high D personality made all of these things. Okay, so let's go through them. The high D, the dominant personality, or the choleric, or the lion, depending upon which of these you are. The lions are the leaders. They're decisive. They want the bottom line. They are the problem solvers. They're not very conversational. Basically, if you're wanting to tell them something, or if you're in a meeting with someone who has a high dominant personality, they just want the facts. What do I need to know? Let me get out of here to my next thing. The way they taught us to figure out if somebody was a high D was to ask one question, and depending on how the person reacted or responded to the question, told us a lot about their personality. And the question was simply, tell me about yourself. A high D will probably come back and tell you about her accomplishments or the things that she's done, what kind of job she works in. Everything that's sort of achievement-oriented would be an answer for a high D. Usually, Ds are very extroverted, quick thinking, very practical. They're bold, and they like to take risks. I married a high D. Anyone else married a high D? Aren't they just pains sometimes? I just say. Okay. Every personality is a pain to somebody. Let's go to the next slide. Influential. Typically, you can tell someone who has a high I personality or a high sanguine or the otter. Usually, this personality type likes to wear a lot of big, bold jewelry, lots of bright colors. Life is super fun, and if you ask her to tell you about herself, she will tell you about her friends and where she went to dinner and the activities that are going on. All of that stuff really appeals to the high I personality. They are fun-loving entertainers. They're the people who like to network. They are creative. They're the talkers. They're extroverted, typically, playful. They're very personable and receptive. And they build relationships very, very quickly. Anyone know any eyes? Any eyes just popping right into your head? All right, let's go to the steady. Steadiness, phlegmatic, and the golden retriever. This personality type is very loving, nurturing, loyal. They're good listeners. They're encouragers. If you ask a woman, tell me about yourself, a high S personality is probably going to talk very slowly, and they're going to tell you about their family. That's what's most important, something that there's going on at home. Talk about her husband. Typically, she'll refer to herself as so-and-so's wife, so-and-so's mom, because that's kind of where her comfort zone is. With a high steadiness, high S personality, when I interact with them, especially in church settings, as a youth minister's wife, I started to use this at church to figure out how could I best minister to the women who were in the congregation and then our teenagers. So when I came across high S, I tended to also soften my voice a little bit. Ask about the family because that's what she wants to talk about. By knowing and kind of understanding what makes each one of these personalities tick, or like in a good way, what makes them excited, then you can have a lot more meaningful conversations with them because you can go directly to the point of where they really would want to talk. S's, which is the steadiness, high S, they live a quiet, routine life, free of the normal anxieties of the other temperaments. They avoid getting too involved with people and life in general, preferring a private, low-key lifestyle centered around the home and family. Anyone know any S's? Yeah. And then this high C personality, which is the conscientious or melancholy, which is that cute little beaver. The high C personality is very detailed. They are accurate. They also like results, but they're focused on quality. They form a plan. They are private. They're typically introverted and very logical. They are also more slow and cautious when talking to you, so they don't open up as fast as the high I, the otter personality will. They'll be your best friend in an instant, whereas a high C personality, it takes a little bit more time to get to know them. They're a little bit more standoffish, but not because they want to be, just because by nature they're a little bit more reserved. They're a little suspicious until they know your intentions. And if you ask a woman, tell me about yourself, and she's a high C personality, typically you'll get something like, well, what exactly do you want to know? She needs more information. You haven't told her what you want her to tell you about. She has lots of things to choose from, and you didn't give her enough. And so sometimes that can be like, well, what do you want to know? Sorry I asked. But if you can realize, okay, this is a high C personality, then you can be more specific. Tell me about your kids. Tell me about your family. Tell me about your job. These are the people that you want working as like the air traffic controllers, like bringing the planes in, because they're going to make sure it gets done accurately, it gets done right. For conferences, these are the people you want taking the registrations and handling the money, because they're going to make sure every penny is accounted for. So all of these personalities work very well together, but they work well when you kind of know what each other's personality is. So for example, have you identified kind of which one you think maybe you fit in yourself through this? Or your spouse, or even your kids maybe? One of our business partners, like I said, there are 4 of us. Each one of us fits into the disc. We've got a high D, a high I, a high S, and a high C, which can make it kind of difficult to work together because we all have to figure out and talk to the other personality profile the way they need to be talked to. But what we've learned is we don't give the high I person anything to do with spreadsheets or deadlines, because they just want to be out there and handle the MC, and they get the crowd going at the conferences. But if we tell him, hey, I need you to do this by this day, I just need to know that I have to remind him 6 times before the deadline. And typically that would make me very mad with my personality type. I don't want to have to remind him. Just make a reminder yourself. But because I know his personality type, I can schedule things into my schedule to help make it work for him. And they do the same for me. So I think really understanding these personality types, especially with our family and our friends and our kids, I think it can make the family life, the home life, your job life just so much more harmonious, because you really end up giving each other a lot of grace. You know where you're strong, and you stand in that, and then you help them in the areas where they're not, but they're going to be stronger in areas that you're not. And by putting people in the places where they can actually shine and succeed actually makes everybody win. And the other cool thing about this too is that in Genesis it says that God created us in his likeness and his image. So all of these personality profiles are parts of who God is. So just because someone's not my personality profile and I might clash with them a little bit, it doesn't mean that I'm right or that they're wrong. It just means that they are more dominant in a personality side of God that I'm not. And I think when we start to really learn and accept that and really kind of dig into it, I think you'll see, I know that I've seen, changes in the way we react with each other. So to close out, God made your story unique. I love that the theme for today is love stories. And I feel like God gave us his love story with the Bible. I feel like we're writing our love stories with God now as we live and through our lives. But God made each one of us unique. He gave us talents and skills and gifts. And I hope that you were able to write down at least 3 things that you're good at, things that God called you to do, things that he has asked of you, even if it's super scary and totally not in your comfort zone. By living in those gifts and accepting who God made us to be, we're able to help write God's love story on our hearts and on the hearts of others. So, thanks.